going on, everyone? Russell here, going to break down the April 21st slate. Unfortunately, just recorded my entire video not realizing my mic wasn't plugged in, so we're going to keep it short and get right to the important points. Alright, so my call about Kleber was spot on last time, and he's priced at 4,600, and we're going to take a look at why that's important. Brandon Clark, 4,700, Finney Smith, 5,400. Now, Kleber is obviously going to be popular, a lot of recency bias. Obviously, he's not going to be, hitting 8 threes every night, but that could inflate his ownership. So one pivot I really like is Brandon Clark. Clark only played 27 minutes last game, but it was a blowout. Steven Adams only played like 3 because, he's struggling with Towns. So I like Brandon Clark a lot as probably my favorite power forward pivot to Kleber on the slate. Finney Smith plays 42 minutes, so he could pop. And if he does and Brandon Clark doesn't, I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the optimal. But I like Clark a lot more, and here's why. Just from a pure mathematical perspective, right? So if you can't see, he's projected for 28 points about, and Finney Smith is projected for about 30 fantasy points. But if you look at their ceiling, Brandon Clark has a ceiling of 42 projection and Finney Smith about 40. So that doesn't happen too often when you order them by salary, right? A lower priced guy has a higher ceiling than a guy priced above him. So I always kind of look for that, regardless of even thinking about it from like a basketball perspective, just from purely a DFS perspective. So that's another thing I look out for, and another reason why I really like Brandon Clark. Another good pivot I would like more than Finney Smith is Jaren Jackson, right? If they're not playing Adams, Jackson could see 35 minutes. He doesn't typically see more than 30, but it has happened, and he has a ceiling around 50, so he'll definitely be in the optimal if that happens. So you can't fade Kleber, but I would go lower than the field is on him. Roster more Brandon Clark than the field. A little bit more Jaren Jackson, not too much more. And another pivot I like, if you want to go cheaper, would be Royce. He's only at 4K, played 37 minutes last game, scored 30 fantasy points, so that crushes value. And if you want, kind of a more unique lineup construction, you can pivot down at power forward. Okay, while we're still on that game talking about Memphis, if you do like Jaren Jackson, he is very highly correlated with Desmond Bane. And let's say, Minnesota changes their strategy on how to deal with Ja, who played amazing, almost a triple-double in 30 minutes. All right, so that could open up more usage for Desmond Bane or Dylan Brooks. And, Desmond Bane, has a high ceiling around 50. But so you could stack those two. Really like that stack. If you're going to play one, might as well play both. Another thing I noticed at small forward, so again, it happens again here, slight, Brooks is 100 more than Bogdan. Oh no, never mind, his ceiling's the same. But what I meant to say was Brooks being 100 more than Bogdan might lower his ownership more than Bogdan's is. Because, if people are deciding between two players, they'll typically take the cheaper one to fit him in. So Brooks is actually projected for more ownership than Bogdan. Not sure if that's actually going to happen because he hasn't hit value in either of his games against Minnesota. So I like him more than Bogdan if you were choosing between the two. All right, back to some Jazz players, which is going to be important in this slate. One sec. Okay, so at guard, two guards that I think could go overlooked on the slate are Conley and Mitchell. Right, you have Brunson at 8K going off, so he'll be popular. You have Poole playing amazing, also in the 8K range. Actually, let me just go back to all teams. Right, you have D'Lo, who I also like as a tournament play who's cheaper. Dinwiddie, also like as a tournament play who's cheaper. So with all these options, I think Mitchell and Conley could go very overlooked. Now, if you're going to play Conley, even though we haven't seen it much this year, last year he was very highly correlated with Gobert. Actually won third place in a huge GPP, stacking him, Bogdan, and Gobert in a 2-game slate. So if you're going to play Conley, I like playing Gobert. And I think Gobert will be overlooked too because of, people might be a little down on him by Kleber destroying them. But the Jazz could adjust, right? They could play more Daniel House with, what's it called? With Royce O'Neal. So who knows? Maybe they do that, and then Gobert just destroys them in the paint. And we've seen his ceiling when he's getting blocks and rebounds is mid 60s. So I like Conley and Gobert as a stack. And if you're not interested in playing them, I love Mitchell. Could go overlooked. Has slate breaking ceiling. Very cheap. 8,400 is way more than reasonable. We haven't seen that crazy ceiling yet, but in the playoffs when he against Denver, him and Jamal Murray were just like going off. So obviously could break the slate at 8,400. Any other players in that game? Talked about Finney Smith, Clark, Royce. Yeah, I think that's it for that game. Another player I liked last game was Reggie. Had a good performance. He's priced up now at 5,100. I don't think he'll be this high, 21 to 25. So he could be an interesting play just from a DFS perspective because he's at an awkward price. All right, speaking of people at awkward prices, we have 2 guards I really like in D'Lo at 7K and Dinwiddie at 7,300. Now, even though Dinwiddie's ceiling isn't quite as high as Brunson, as I mentioned in last video, right? If Brunson doesn't go off, Dinwiddie certainly can. We've seen it, on the Nets a couple of years ago, and his ceiling's around 50. And if he does, he's only projected for 13 to 16%, which is pretty low on a 3-game slate. Yeah. So I like Dinwiddie as a tournament play, and I also like D'Lo, right? If Minnesota wants a chance, Anthony Edwards can't do it all, right? And before Edwards was on the team, I know he takes away a lot of usage from D'Lo. 7K would have been like a steal for D'Lo because we've seen his ceiling, and he can be crazy on a per minute basis if he's on 50, 60 fantasy points. So I like going higher than the field is on D'Lo, and same thing with Towns. I mean, talk about slate breakers. Towns could break the slate at 9,300. He struggled with foul trouble last game, and Minnesota just hasn't looked great, but that game by far has the highest over-under, so it could be a juicy game to go in on D'Lo, go in on Towns, and of course you have to consider Edwards. And even Beverly could be an interesting play at that cheap price, but like I said, I'd prefer Conley. And I would definitely prefer Conley over Monte Morris as well. Any other players in that game? So we talked about the Jaren Jackson, Desmond Bane correlation, Brandon Clark pivot. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So another tough guard slate. Ja, price at the top, played amazing, almost triple-double in 30 minutes. So can't fade him. Plus, he's like outside. He's on the higher spot of the that price range where a lot of the guards are going to be taken, like Brunson at 8K, Poole at 8,100. Obviously, opposite of Conley being priced down, him priced up. So, Ja, I like and could go under owned. 17 to 20%, showing a lot of leverage here. Curry, we don't know how much he's going to play, but if he does see 30 and you're making a bunch, you got to throw him in one because we know Curry's ceiling. And obviously, 9 to 12% is super low. It could be even lower than that. Now, if you are going in on Golden State players, right, the only way that they hit value is if the game is close, right? And first 2 games haven't been close. So if you're going to play, any Golden State players, I would recommend also playing Denver players. Obviously, Jokic is by far the highest ceiling on the team. So if you're playing, let's say you're playing, I don't know, Draymond and Clay, who had a high correlation in the past, not so much this year, throw Jokic in there. He's highly correlated, well, moderately correlated with Aaron Gordon. Hasn't been, it's a tough matchup for him. But we've seen his ceiling. So if you're going Clay and Draymond, maybe go Jokic and Gordon. Okay. Any other players from that game? Dart throw, I don't love, but Jeff Green, 3,300. Could see around 25, maybe 30 minutes, depending on game flow. And he does have upside. So he's someone to consider for making a bunch of lineups, but, I'd rather go Royce. And I would even rather take a bigger dart throw on Daniel House at 3,200. Saw 20 minutes last game, near min price. Obviously, he doesn't have the highest usage on that team, but when he was on Houston, we saw his ceiling pop a few times. And like I said, if they do that strategy by playing more House to deal with Kleber, who knows? Maybe he is in the winning lineup at 2 to 4% owned. So if you're making a bunch, not the worst dart throw. I kind of like it, but wouldn't recommend it if you're making like under 10 lineups. Other players I want to touch on. Just double check. No, I think that's pretty much all the important points. All right, good luck, everyone. Until next time.